It wasn't the sight of my daughter's shaved head or the cruel laughter of my sister that finally shattered me. It was the voice of my husband, Brian. He looked not at our sobbing child, but at the two warring sisters, and delivered his verdict. Stop making a scene. He told me, in that moment, he made the abuser and the protector equal. My sister may have held the clippers, but my husband held the knife that truly cut me loose. It all started at our annual family barbecue. Before we jump into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach and connect with amazing viewers like you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next surprising turn in our journey. Now, get comfortable and let's dive into a tale that will leave you inspired and intrigued. My name is Hannah. It wasn't the sight of my daughter's shaved head or the cruel laughter of my sister that finally shattered me. It was the voice of my husband, Brian. He looked not at our sobbing child, but at the two warring sisters, and delivered his verdict. Stop making a scene, he told me. In that moment, he made the abuser and the protector equal. My sister may have held the clippers, but my husband held the knife that truly cut me loose. It all started at our annual family barbecue, a day that was supposed to be about celebrating the end of summer, but for me, was always about survival. The dread had started that morning, a low hum of anxiety beneath the cheerful Saturday cartoons. Grace, my 9-year-old daughter, was practically vibrating with excitement, laying out the special dress she planned to wear. It was a soft, yellow sundress that made her look like a little piece of sunshine. "Do you think everyone will like my braids, Mommy?" she asked, twirling in front of the mirror as I painstakingly wove her honey-colored hair into an intricate crown. For 3 years, that hair had been her pride, a tangible symbol of her goal to donate it to a charity for children with cancer. Each inch represented her patience and her enormous heart. "Of course they will, sweetie," I said, my smile feeling tight. "You look beautiful." But as I secured the final pin, my phone buzzed. It was my mother, Judith. "Hannah, just a reminder the grill starts at 1 sharp." Her text read, "And could you be a dear? And bring your 7-layer dip. Tiffany is bringing that artisanal cheese platter from downtown. So we need something a little more substantial." The subtext, as always, was clear. Tiffany brings the glamour. You bring the predictable, boring staple. I texted back a simple, "Of course," my stomach twisting into a familiar knot. Brian found me in the kitchen, staring into the open refrigerator. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Getting nervous?" he asked, his voice light. He always treated my anxiety about these gatherings as a silly, unfounded quirk. "It's just family." "And it's never just family, Brian," I said, pulling away to grab the ingredients. "It's a performance. You know how Tiffany gets, and your mother just—" I trailed off, not wanting to start a fight before we even left. "My mother and your sister," he corrected gently, as if the distinction mattered. "They love you. They just have a funny way of showing it. Just ignore them, for Grace's sake. Let's just have a nice day." That was his mantra. Ignore it, appease it. Do anything but confront it. For the sake of a fragile peace that always came at my expense. The moment we arrived, the performance began. The air in my mother's backyard was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and grilling burgers. A smell that should have meant comfort, but for me only ever signaled tension. Judith greeted us with air kisses, her eyes immediately scanning my simple dip with a polite, dismissive smile before lighting up as she saw Tiffany. "There's my star," she exclaimed, pulling my sister into a dramatic embrace. Tiffany, a lifestyle influencer whose life was as curated as her social media feed, lapped it up, her phone already held aloft to capture the moment. Brian, true to form, immediately assimilated, grabbing a beer and laughing a little too loudly at a joke my father told. I found a quiet corner, with Grace sticking close to my side, my Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister, and the only one in the family who seemed to operate on the same frequency as me, caught my eye from across the lawn. She gave me a small, sympathetic smile that said, "I see you. I know this is hard." It was a tiny gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. Grace, however, was still buoyed by her own excitement. She soon found her grandmother and began to explain, with a serious and proud expression, her plan to donate her hair. I watched from a distance, my heart swelling with pride. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope maybe today would be different. That hope was short-lived. Tiffany, having spotted an audience, glided over. "Oh, look at our little saint," she cooed, her voice dripping with a sweetness more poisonous than venom. "Always thinking of others. You're going to make such great content for the charities page." "Sweetie," Grace beamed, not catching the sarcastic edge. But I saw it. Aunt Carol saw it too, her smile faltering for a second. A little later, as Grace was reaching for a cup of lemonade, Tiffany swept past, accidentally knocking a full glass of iced tea off the table. It splashed across the flagstones, narrowly missing Grace's dress, but spattering the ends of her beautiful braid. "Oh, clumsy me," Tiffany cried with a theatrical gasp. Brian was there in an instant, laughing. "Good save, Gracie," he said, ruffling her damp hair. "Just a little tea, no harm done." He looked at me, his eyes pleading with me to let it go. And so I did. I took Grace to the bathroom to dab her hair dry. My silence, another small sacrifice on the altar of family peace. I tried to steer Grace towards the swing set, away from her aunt's chaotic energy. As I passed Tiffany, she lowered her phone and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "It's a shame it's all getting cut off soon. It's practically the only thing people notice about her." The comment was a quiet, sharp jab designed to wound both my daughter and me. I froze for a second, then kept walking, my hand protectively on Grace's back. I glanced at Brian. He had been close enough to hear. He simply gave a slight shake of his head, a familiar gesture that meant, "Don't engage, don't make it worse." He had heard the cruelty, and he had chosen to look away. The main event of the afternoon was, of course, orchestrated by Tiffany. "Okay, everyone," she clapped, commanding attention. Just to celebrate me, I'm going to do a fun makeover challenge with the kids." She produced a large glittering bag filled with makeup and brightly colored hairsprays. Then, she pulled out the final item, a brand new, cordless electric clipper. "Don't worry," she giggled. "This is just a fun prop for a super edgy, faux hawk look." A wave of polite, uncertain laughter went through the adults. My blood ran cold. "Grace isn't participating. Tiffany," I said, my voice firm but quiet. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted to draw a single, clear boundary. But Brian saw it as a threat to his carefully constructed peace. He stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt more like a restraint than a comfort. "Come on, Han," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't spoil the fun. It's just a game. The kids are having a blast." He turned to our daughter, his smile dismissive of my parental authority. "Go on, Grace, go have fun with your Aunt Tiffany." In front of our entire family. He had publicly vetoed my decision, overruled my intuition, and handed our daughter over to the one person I was trying to shield her from. Grace looked at me, her face uncertain. But Brian gave her a little nudge forward. She reluctantly followed the other children as they swarmed around Tiffany and headed upstairs. The children disappeared, and I sat in a plastic lawn chair, a cold can of soda sweating in my hand, feeling utterly powerless and humiliated. The cheerful party chatter around me sounded distant and distorted. Aunt Carol came and sat beside me, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "I'm sure it will be fine," she said, though her eyes were filled with the same worry I felt. "Brian means well. He just hates conflict." "His hatred of conflict is going to get his daughter hurt one day," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. The quiet from the second floor was wrong. The initial bursts of laughter had faded, replaced by a focused silence that felt more ominous than any loud noise. 20 minutes later, some of the younger cousins came clattering downstairs to grab cookies, their faces smeared with glitter. But Grace wasn't with them. "Where's Grace?" I asked my nephew. He just shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know, still upstairs with Aunt Tiffany," as I pretended to watch the party. I drifted closer to the kitchen, where I could hear my mother and my aunt talking in hushed, worried tones. "Lost the apartment. You know," my aunt said. "And that marketing firm let her go? He broke up with her last Tuesday. She's putting on a brave face, but she's about to snap," Judith replied, her voice laced with a genuine concern she never showed me. The news hit me like a physical blow. Tiffany's perfect life was a facade, and she was a woman on the edge, armed with a pair of clippers and an audience of children. My unease solidified into pure fear. I stood up, telling Brian I was going to check on them. "Hannah, for God's sake, sit down." He sighed, not looking up from the sports highlights on his phone. "You're going to embarrass yourself." But I couldn't sit still. I walked towards the house, and as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard it, a faint, intermittent buzzing sound. I told Brian what I heard, my voice trembling. "I hear the clippers." He finally looked up, annoyed. "It's probably just a sound from a video. Han, you worry too much." He turned back to his phone. I was alone. I placed my foot on the first step, my heart pounding. But before I could take another, my phone vibrated. It was a notification from our family group chat. Tiffany had just sent a video. The thumbnail was a blurry close-up of a lock of long, honey-colored hair, severed and falling through the air. The caption beneath it was a string of laughing emojis and a single, chilling sentence. "Surprise makeover for our little princess." I flew up the stairs, ignoring Brian calling my name. The world had narrowed to the closed bedroom door at the end of the hall. I threw it open. Grace was sitting on a stool, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Her head was a mess of jagged, uneven patches of stubble. Her beautiful hair lay in tragic piles on the floor. Tiffany stood behind her, the clippers in one hand and her phone in the other, a manic, triumphant grin on her face. "It's just a joke, Hannah," she chirped. "Lighten up, we were just speeding up the donation process for her." The family crowded the doorway. My mother pushed through, her first instinct to defend her favored daughter. "Tiffany, what did you do?" she gasped, but her tone was one of mild annoyance. Not outrage. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the wreckage. Judith stepped in front of Tiffany. "Stop it, Hannah," she hissed. "You're always making everything about you. It's hair, it will grow back." I finally turned my eyes to my husband, my last hope. I looked at Brian, silently pleading with him to see, to understand, to finally stand with me. He walked into the room, his eyes taking in Grace's shorn head, Tiffany's wild expression, and my own devastated silence. He took a deep, weary breath, the sigh of a man burdened by the inconvenience of the drama. And then he spoke the words that ended our marriage. He didn't look at Grace. He looked at me, and he looked at Tiffany. "All right, both of you," he said, his voice calm and reasonable. "That's enough, Tiffany. You apologized to your sister and Hannah. You need to stop making such a big deal out of this. We're all family here." He said it. He equated an act of assault with a mother's pain. That was the final betrayal. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. I walked past my mother, past my sister, and past the man who was no longer my husband. I knelt in front of my daughter. "Grace," I whispered, "we're leaving." I gently lifted her from the stool, her small, trembling body clinging to mine, as I carried her through the stunned crowd. No one tried to stop me. I walked down the stairs, through the living room, and out the front door. I placed Grace in her car seat, buckled her in, and got behind the wheel. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw them gathered on the front lawn, watching us go. They still didn't realize they were witnessing an ending. The drive home was wrapped in a thick, painful silence. I kept glancing over at Grace in the passenger seat, huddled under a blanket I'd pulled from the trunk, her face hidden, her small, hitching breaths were the only sound. As we pulled into our driveway, she finally spoke, her voice muffled by the fleece. "I'm sorry, Mommy," she whispered. "I told her to stop, but she wouldn't listen." Her cousins held my hands. My heart fractured all over again. "Oh, baby," I choked out, reaching over to squeeze her shoulder. "This is not your fault. You hear me? None of this is your fault. You have nothing to be sorry for." I got her inside and straight into a warm bath, adding her favorite lavender bubbles, hoping it would offer some small comfort while she soaked, her face still a pale mask of shock. I sat on the living room floor, the buzzing of the party still ringing in my ears. Grace had a nightmare that night, waking up crying that her head felt cold. I pulled her into my bed and held her until the sun began to stream through the blinds. The dawn of a new and terrible reality. The next morning, my phone began its assault, a barrage of texts and missed calls. From my mother, "You are tearing this family apart over a childish prank." From Tiffany, I said I was sorry. "What more do you want?" And from Brian, a dozen times a Hannah, "Pick up the phone. We need to talk about this like adults." Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It was Brian. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there, his face etched with frustration. Not remorse. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the wood. "There's nothing to talk about, Brian." "Don't be ridiculous. Hannah." His voice came through, strained. "Let me in. We can't just throw away our marriage over a bad haircut." "It wasn't a bad haircut," I said, my own voice chillingly calm. "It was an assault that you witnessed, an assault on our daughter that you chose to dismiss. You didn't protect her, and you didn't defend me. You chose them. So now, you can have them." I heard him sigh, then swear under his breath before his footsteps finally retreated. That was when I walked into our bedroom, methodically. I pulled his suitcases from the closet and began to pack. I folded his shirts, his pants, his life, into neat, impersonal piles. There were no tears, only a profound and absolute certainty. The weeks that followed were a blur. Grace was terrified to go back to school. "Everyone will laugh at me," she cried, refusing to take off the soft beanie she now wore constantly. We talked to her principal and her teacher, who were wonderfully supportive, but the real breakthrough came from her best friend, a little girl named Lily. when Lily came over for a play date. She saw Grace's new short hair, her eyes wide. She gently reached out and touched the soft stubble. "Wow," she whispered. "It looks so cool. You look like a superhero." In that moment, a child's simple, honest kindness did more than any adult reassurance ever could. There were hard days. I would be in the middle of the grocery store and suddenly be overwhelmed with a wave of rage so intense I'd have to grip the shopping cart to keep from screaming. The betrayal had deep roots, and digging them out was painful work. I started seeing a therapist who gave me the language for what I was feeling. She helped me understand that Brian's peacemaking was a form of control, a way to keep the dysfunctional system running by silencing the one person who was trying to point out the poison. A year passed. We moved into a new apartment across town, one filled with light and plants and none of the ghosts of our old life. Grace's hair grew back, and she decided to keep it in a chic pixie cut that framed her face and highlighted the new confidence in her eyes. On the anniversary of that day, we decided to reclaim it. We filled our small living room with balloons and baked a cake as we sat on the floor, eating frosting with our fingers. Grace looked at me. "Mommy," she asked, "what are we celebrating?" I reached out and tucked a stray piece of her short hair behind her ear. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Today is our family day, sweetie," I told her. "It's the anniversary of the day we chose each other." She understood. Her face broke into a radiant grin, and we laughed together, a sound of pure, uncomplicated joy. Later, as we were cleaning up, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from Judith. "The whole family misses you and Grace. It's not the same without you." I looked at the message, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even a flicker of regret. I simply held my finger down on the screen until the option appeared, and I deleted it without opening, turning back to the beautiful, peaceful life my daughter and I had built, just for us. The deepest betrayals rarely come from the hands of an obvious enemy. More often, they are delivered in the quiet voice of someone who was meant to be your safe harbor, the one who chooses a fragile, false peace over your protection. This journey teaches us a profound lesson. Family is not an obligation to be endured, but a sanctuary that must be earned. It is defined not by blood, but by the safety and respect found within it. When a bond becomes a cage, the bravest act is not to fight, but to find the key and set yourself free. True strength is sometimes found in the quiet act of walking away and choosing your own peace over their dysfunction. It's in the realization that you don't have to win the argument. You just have to leave the battlefield, from that quiet space, from the ashes of what was broken. New beginnings can finally, truly grow. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to protect your peace by setting a boundary with family? Your story matters. Share your experience in the comments below. Your voice creates a community of strength and support for so many. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story with us. Remember, choosing yourself is never the wrong choice.